Hi, I'm EJ, this is NonCompete, and this is a video that I was really hoping I wouldn't have to make. As of the time of recording, it strongly looks like Donald Trump has been reelected as President of the United States of America. I know that a lot of people who watch this channel are in vulnerable segments of society, and this has you deeply concerned, and there is cause for that concern. But I hope today to deliver to you a message of hope. I do believe that there's hope for humanity. I also think that there will be very difficult struggles ahead. We have to rise and face those challenges head on with revolutionary optimism. But first, let me introduce myself. If you're new to the channel, I was born and raised in the United States of America in a very conservative state, South Carolina. I used to be gung-ho, patriotic American citizen number one. I believed all the propaganda I was exposed to growing up. I thought the USA was the best nation in the world, bar none. I thought we did things better than everyone else. And I bought in completely into capitalism as well. I started several businesses in my youth, in my 20s. And then in the 2007-2008 collapse, I was exposed to the true nature of capitalism in all its brutality. So I've had a pretty long political journey. I've gone through a lot of different ideologies, and today I stand before you as a committed communist. And if you're new here, that word might have already scared you away. I hope it didn't. I hope you'll, especially now where we are right now, you might be willing to listen to some alternative perspectives about the system in place in the USA. And if you have an open mind, please stick around. We have a lot to talk about. So I want to begin with just a personal story, how I came to be standing before you in this seat talking about communism. Not something I ever saw for myself. If you would have told me when I was in my teens and early 20s that I was going to eventually become a big, scary pinko commie, I would have laughed in your face, because I was a right-wing libertarian. I was all about capitalism. I thought that competition in the free market was the best path forward for humanity. But it took a lot of kind of bumps and knocks through life to come to realize that the system doesn't do what it says on the tin, as comrades across the pond might say. Capitalism exists to serve the ruling class only and to exploit and oppress workers, period. Now, the ways in which it does this are very complicated and have developed a lot over time. The way that it works right now in the United States of America is through a system called the Duoparty. We talked about this in the last couple of videos, but what you have to understand is that both the Republican Party and the Democrat Party are firmly in control of the ruling class. They do not exist for workers. They do not serve workers. They exist at the behest of capitalists. When you start to realize that, then you start to see all the different ways in which capital divides the working class. Capitalism must divide workers. Why? Because there are so many more of us than there are of them. If we were to come together, if we were to unite, then they wouldn't stand a chance against us. They wouldn't be able to exploit us and do all of the terrible things that they do to workers around the world. And that's why they have these systems in place of division. Things like bigotry, racism, the whole concept of whiteness, transphobia, homophobia, all of these things exist to divide workers. And that's why capitalist media and capitalist political parties like the Republicans foment these kinds of divisions, okay? And the way that the Duoparty system works, it's a carrot and stick system. The Democrats offer a mere pittance to workers. Things like, you know, oh, we won't take away your basic human rights. Or at least we won't take them away as quickly as the Republicans do, right? And then the Republicans are the stick. If you're in a vulnerable sector of society, if you're poor, if you're an immigrant, whatever, then you are also controlled through fear of the farther right-wing Republicans. I started to realize this when I left the USA in 2012, because the financial collapse of 2007 and 8 had hit me and my businesses so hard. I gave my business away to my employees, and I took my debt to South Korea to teach English. And my plan was to pay off that debt with the money I was making there and go back. But as soon as I landed in South Korea, I realized, holy shit, everything I've been told my entire life, everything I've believed very strongly and felt very strongly, none of it's true. South Korea was, like, by my standards, just incredible. They had public transportation. I had access to public health care for the first time in my adult life. And it was just the first indication that the USA doesn't do everything better than the rest of the world. When I moved to Vietnam a year later, it was even more apparent that I had been lied to, because I was always told that Vietnam was this terrifying, authoritarian, scary place, and it just wasn't. And the people were just really friendly and welcoming, and nobody hated me because I was American like I thought they would. And I felt more free walking around there. And to this day, it's just been getting better and better every year. Materially, the conditions of the people who live in Vietnam have been getting better and better over time. You see the cities developing. You see public transportation developing. They have beautiful, top-of-the-line electric buses now in Hanoi. They have a metro system in Hanoi. It's beautiful. They protect each other. During COVID, it was just a remarkably eye-opening experience how the government took great pains to protect the people, and people took care of each other. Neighbors took care of neighbors. My neighbors were very concerned about me because I was a foreigner, because I was far away from my family. They were constantly checking in, asking if I was okay. They gave me beef all the time when we were under lockdown because they thought, he's an American. He must like steak. He must like hamburgers, which I can't deny. I do enjoy those things. It was very welcome, the beef. But my point is that traveling and seeing this part of the world, especially Vietnam, helped me to understand that my indoctrination, which was what it was, that I had received my entire life, it was all based on lies. And there are other ways to build a society that are far better than what we have in the USA right now. And what really cemented this for me was 2015, 8 years ago today, when Donald Trump won the first election. But to backtrack a little bit, Bernie Sanders appealed to me a lot because I was, a fairly young person. I had spent about a decade trying to build a better life for myself, and nothing worked the way I was told it would work. I was told if you work really hard, if you go to college, you get a degree, you start a business, become an entrepreneur, you'll succeed in America, the American dream. But that wasn't the way it was. I watched them bail out all these huge banks. I watched all these capitalists take bailouts and take billions of dollars from the government. I never got a bailout, and I was supposed to be like the small business owner, the backbone of the economy. But the system didn't exist for people like me. It doesn't exist for workers. It doesn't exist for little people. It exists for the ruling class, the capitalists who own the predominant means of production, okay? Well, Bernie built skepticism into my worldview first, and along with my experiences through travel. And when I saw the way that the Democrats screwed Bernie over in 2015, and then put this neoliberal Hillary Clinton, who's much more of an establishment figure, into the campaign, and then I saw her get defeated by Trump. Well, that day, the day that Trump won the presidency, was the day when I completely broke with the American system. That was the day when I realized, wait a minute, if a fascist like Donald Trump could be elected in this system, then it's not a good system. That's proof enough to me that we've got to do things differently. There's something's got to change radically. And that's when I did something I'd never done in my entire life before. I admitted that I was completely wrong. I admitted that I didn't have all the answers, and I started searching for answers. It was humbling. And I'm glad it happened because it led me to communism. It led me to understand that capitalism is a system of oppression. It's unjust and it's unstable, and it will collapse. Maybe not in our lifetime. Maybe it'll take hundreds of years. I don't know. But it will collapse. If there's too many contradictions internal to it, it's unstable, and it will collapse. Right now, I believe that the USA is in decline. And I think that Trump's re-election, his election and now his re-election, are signs of that decline. I think that capitalists are losing control because of things like the internet. Okay, this was a development in the productive forces of humanity that they didn't account for, and it kind of blindsided them. And now it connects workers together around the world. I'm in Vietnam right now, talking to you wherever you are, in ways that they didn't anticipate. We've seen them say that, and when I say they, I mean the ruling class, the politicians in charge. We've seen them say that the internet has caused a degree of loss of control for the ruling class, especially when it comes to our culture. They can't just dictate to us through mass media everything now. Now, there are good aspects and bad aspects to these developments. And Trump is one of the bad aspects. Because one thing that the internet also allows for is the spread of these cult-like social phenomena, like the red pill manosphere movement, the MAGA movement, the redevelopment of things like white nationalism and white supremacism in the USA. And on that note, I want to talk about whiteness itself, because whiteness is a form of false consciousness. Okay, whiteness doesn't exist, and it's one of the most important and powerful tools that capitalists use to separate us. Whiteness and patriarchy, transphobia. I'm non-binary myself. I know the ways in which the LGBTQ plus community has been severely targeted. We're, just another scapegoat, just like immigrants are a scapegoat. Okay, fascism. There's a lot of videos out there about, how do you define fascism? What is fascism? And fascism, it manifests in a lot of different ways. But if you had to ask me what fascism is, what the common thread is that unites all the different fascist movements that have existed around the world, it's what I call anti-humanism. Okay? And when I say that, I mean, when I say humanism, I'm talking about an idea that the human species can and should work together to improve the lot of all of humanity. We should all work together. We should all realize that we're all one species and we're all in this together. We all share one planet, which we're learning now is a very delicate system, right? And there's no guarantee that we're all going to make it, we could muck things up to the point where humanity's days could be numbered. And but as a humanist, as a communist humanist, I believe that the human race can and should come together in celebration of our differences. Okay, we need to build. You could call it whatever you want to call it. You could call it diversity without chauvinism, without supremacism. Okay, a celebration of diversity. Because there are all these different beautiful cultures around the world. There are all these different ways of experiencing gender. There are all these different languages that people speak. I love learning foreign languages. Those are things that we should celebrate, and not despite those differences, but in celebration of those differences, we should come together as one species, and that should be our goal. And that's the goal of communism, is to build a stateless, classless society in which all human beings can chart our own destiny together as equals, as comrades. That's the world that we as communists want to live in, okay? And it's a multi-generational ambition. I'm not saying we're going to get there overnight. I doubt that I'll see that in my lifetime. But that's how I define humanism. And then I see fascism as anti-humanism. Fascists seek to divide humanity up into different castes, different groups. And then some of those groups are seen as superior and others are seen as inferior. That's the common thread of fascism. Unfortunately, fascism, in that, by my definition, by that definition of the term, has been the default in the USA since the beginning. Donald Trump, in my mind, I'm going to share some harsh truths with you, okay? I'm going to say some things to you that I haven't said before. I've held my tongue. But they need to be said. The founding fathers of the United States of America were proto-fascists in my mind, okay? And in future videos and projects, I want to build that case more strongly. But for now, just bear with me, okay? Look at what they were doing. They were adamant that we suppress indigenous people at the time, that we keep black folks enslaved, and they were adamantly opposed to what was called the leveling movement at the time. And leveling was basically just kind of this proto-communist idea that everyone should have kind of like economic equalities. I'm really shorthanding it, but they wanted to make sure that they maintained their position as white, landowning, slave-holding men in society. They didn't want women to vote. They wanted to separate everyone up and have these categories in which they were at the very top of that hierarchy. Okay? That's what the Founding Fathers wanted. They wanted only white, landowning men to vote. And land at the time was the most important form of capital in the USA. The Industrial Revolution hadn't really hit the USA at that time. Land, if you were a landowner, that was the most powerful capitalist, I guess you could call it strata, okay? And that was the ruling class of the USA. And they wanted to firmly put themselves in that commanding position of society, and they did it. And through all the different developments of the productive forces and the relations of production that we've had since that time, the Industrial Revolution, the information age, the individual capitalists who have the most power have changed, right? So first it was the landowners during the agrarian period, and then as industry came about, it was the industrialists, the robber barons, and now in this day and age, it's people in the technology and information sector, because that happens to be the predominant productive force right now. And so today, the capitalists with the most power are in the tech industry, people like Zuckerberg and Musk and Peter Thiel, and they're the ones that are pushing this new kind of fascism in various ways. Now, I threw Zuckerberg in there, considered to be more of a liberal, right? Well, I'm sorry to say this, it's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, but I just see liberalism and the Democratic Party as kind of soft fascism, the lighter left wing of fascism. And I've held my tongue about this over the last few months. I've wanted to talk about it. In fact, Luna, my partner, and I recorded a video about this, criticizing Kamala Harris. We recorded it literally the day after Kamala got the nomination. We made a pretty cutting video critiquing Kamala, showing how she really wasn't that much different from Biden. But then we sat on it and we didn't release it. And the reason was because, and I still believe this, that, a Trump presidency will be worse for workers, for the material conditions of workers, and will endanger a lot of people more so and more quickly than Kamala Harris. Okay, I think that Kamala Harris is an absolute monster for supporting the genocide in Gaza, for demonizing immigrants and making that a core part of the platform for the Democratic ticket. But she wouldn't have been as fast and as loud and overtly divisive as Trump. And at the very least, she wouldn't have given Project 2025 a mandate, right? So you could call it cowardice, maybe. I don't know. But we decided not to release the video that we recorded because we wanted to just not be interpreted as like somehow supporting Trump or anything like that. Because there are wacky people out there who are supporting Trump from like a working class perspective. It makes absolutely no sense, and we didn't want to contribute to that in any way or be seen as contributing to that. But now that all the cards are on the table, I will tell you that the Democrats are fascist by my definition. They want to divide people. Palestine alone is an issue in which the Democrats are undeniably, rabidly, aggressively fascist, because Israel is a fascist colonial project of the United States of America. Israel could not exist without the material support of the United States of America. There's no way that Israel could do what they're doing right now without the superpower of the USA backing them every step of the way. And that means Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That's, by the way, contributed greatly to the situation we're in right now, because I know a lot of people didn't vote for Kamala Harris, and a lot of Muslim Americans didn't vote for her because of the situation in Gaza. And frankly, who can blame them? How are you going to ask people whose family members are gone because of the policies that she supports and the racist, fascist colonialism that she tacitly supports? The DNC and the Republican Party are a binary system. They are a duoparty. They use the carrot from the Democrats and the stick from the Republicans to control, coerce, and terrorize the people of the USA into submission. And they want us to think that the only way forward is to vote. Look where voting has gotten us. For 8 years now, I've been told that we have to vote blue no matter who. We have to build up the DNC and then push them to the left and blah, 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 blah. It's gotten us nowhere. It's pulled us backwards, okay? We went from Obama, in my lifetime of voting, we went from George W. Bush, who was an aggressive fascist, to Obama, who was supposed to be more progressive. But then we got more of the same. We got war. We got suppression of black folks in Ferguson. We got the concentration camps for immigrants built under Obama's administration with Joe Biden as the architect. Okay? Then we go to Trump, 4 years of fascism, direct overt fascism. And then we get Joe Biden. Now, when Obama ran in 2008, I'm old enough to remember, Biden was supposed to be like the really conservative mediating vice president that was supposed to like tamp down a little bit on the progressive policies of Obama. Biden has a long history of racism when it comes to Palestinians, but also racism against black people. He bragged about how many executions, he helped facilitate back in the 90s. He was part of the whole super predator, that disgusting language that was being used. He is a fascist. Joe Biden is a fascist. You can't convince me otherwise. Again, just the way that he has been rabidly in support of the police state in the USA and rabidly in support of the colonial genocidal project that is Israel and the genocide of Palestinian people, those two issues alone, in my book, mark him as a fascist. Okay? He's not as loud about it as Donald Trump, and he's more willing to play ball with the more liberal wing of the capitalist duoparty system. But at the end of the day, he's a fascist. And you can't fight fascism with fascism. That's the main point I want to make with you today. And we have to come to understand that this democratic liberalism is a lighter, softer form of fascism, and it's all part of the same construct. And that's the reason Kamala Harris lost. Because you can't fire people up who are anti-fascist, and I believe that most workers are anti-fascist. I do believe that. I have faith in the workers of the USA, okay? As cynical as I might be sometimes, I have faith in the workers of the USA. And I know as a non-binary person that most people in the USA are not transphobic. They're not opposed to gay marriage. They support LGBTQ plus people. It's astroturfed, capitalist-backed campaigns, and I have a video on this if you want to. I'll put a link in the description. But that's what is putting all of these dangerous policies in effect around the country. It's not the fact that most workers are transphobic. Most of them aren't. Now, there's a bigger problem with whiteness, because even though most white people, I would say, don't consider themselves racist and don't think of themselves as bigoted against ethnic minorities, whiteness in itself is false consciousness. Now, that's a whole other issue. I have a couple of videos on that, and I'll probably make more in the future. But if you believe that whiteness is anything but a harmful social construct, you are embroiled in false consciousness, just like I was for most of my life, okay? There's no shame in being raised in a cult environment, which is what whiteness is, basically a cult-like social phenomenon. But whiteness is not an objective material reality, okay? It's an objective reality in the sense that it harms people and it has real objective bearing on the world, but like you can't test my blood or measure my skull or anything like that and tell me if I'm white or not. In fact, 150 years ago, I wouldn't have been considered white because I'm about half Irish, and Irish people didn't used to be considered white. So who does and doesn't get included in whiteness, that changes over time, which is just more evidence that it's a social phenomenon. not a material reality. So as white people, we really have to wrap our heads around this and build an abolition movement to abolish whiteness and reject whiteness. And that's a complicated thing, and I know it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers. I'm not new to this. I've said it many times, and I've had a lot of pushback, but I stand firm. You cannot convince me, because there's no evidence for it, that whiteness is anything more than a system that was built alongside capitalism, hand in glove with capitalism, to preserve and reinforce capitalism. And so we have to reject whiteness. There's a lot more to be said about these issues, these specific issues, but I guess by and large, all I'm saying is the workers of the USA, I think most of us have our hearts in the right place. And I think most of us reject fascism, and most of us don't want to be bigots. But it's hard to get people fired up about a party that commits genocide, that oppresses peaceful protesters. On the day that Kamala Harris was nominated, she made a speech in which she talked about the violence that Trump committed against protesters during Black Lives Matter in 2020. On that same day, the Biden administration violently attacked student protesters who were standing up against the genocide in Palestine. On that same day, as she was making that speech. People can't get excited about that. Kamala Harris's whole campaign was appealing to centrists and conservatives and people who are already affluent and well off. That was her whole entire, middle class Liz Cheney ticket. It was all about appealing to people who already have it pretty good here. Only the most she talked a little bit about price gouging, but never really pursued that very much. Kind of downplayed it after she said it, the initial first time. Never offered anything to workers, really. Except for a veiled threat that if you don't vote for me, Trump's going to come in and F you up. Mafia tactics. That's what the Duoparty is. Good cop, bad cop. Put me in power or this guy's going to come make things a lot worse for you. That's the best Kamala had to offer for people like me and presumably people like you if you're watching this and still tuned in. Now, none of this sounds very hopeful so far, right? But here's where the hope comes in. We, as the workers of the United States of America, we have all the power in our hands. We only have to realize it. And that means dismantling false consciousness. This book was translated by my partner. It's the Vietnamese curriculum on dialectical materialism. We're almost finished with part 2 of this curriculum, which is about historical materialism. Read this book. The ebook is free. It's at banyanhouse.org. If you read this book, if you have questions about it, let us know in the comments. We want to help people understand these ideas. This is how you dismantle false consciousness. This is how you deprogram the cult programming. Basically, it's a scientific way of understanding human society. That's all it really is. It's the scientific method for politics. We learn through practice in the real world. Every union, every workers' union, every radical workers' political party, every neighborhood that is organized is a laboratory, and we learn through practice, through doing, not through talking, not through debating, but through standing up and doing and failing and learning from those failures and those mistakes. That's how we move our movement forward. In the USA, this has been abandoned by the workers for about a century, since the working class movements were all dismantled in the first Red Scare a century ago. Learn your history. That's why we're trying to rush to get the historical materialism book out by the end of the year. And by the way, again, the ebooks are free, okay? banyanhouse.org/shop. They're also on archive.org. They're on Z Library. They're all over the place. Print them out if you want. Learn the history of the working class. Learn the true history of your family. If you're white, your ancestors came from somewhere. If you're like me, that family history has been discarded. Relearn your roots, your culture. Especially if you're a minority, preserve your culture. My partner Luna just put out a video about how important culture is for oppressed people. Learn history, learn the way these things have developed, learn the way that the concept of whiteness has developed, learn the way that capitalism has developed and is continuing to develop. educate yourself, arm yourself, dismantle the false consciousness, and build class consciousness. If we can do that, then we have all the power. If you're trans, if you're LGBTQ+, if you're non-binary like me, we have to build power for our movement. We can't beg for rights from the state. It's getting us nowhere. Voting is getting us nowhere. We have to stand up and build power, seize power in our own hands by building a movement, by building organizational structures in our communities, standing up for ourselves, fighting tooth and nail for our own humanity. That's what this is all about. We must be humanists. And we must overcome the differences and all of these artificial separations. And, you know, this is difficult. I don't have an answer for this, but we have to come to terms with the fact that there are millions of overt, proud fascists in the USA. It's just a reality. That's just a fact. There are millions of people who love Donald Trump, love his ideas and his policies. Lots of men who want to build patriarchy to be stronger and more suppressive of women. Lots of white people who want to proudly proclaim that they are white nationalists and they want to kick out all the immigrants and, you know, build their power structure to be even more commanding and oppressive in the United States of America. The USA is a prison of nations. Some of them, like black folks, have been brought here historically against their will. Some of them, like indigenous folks, it's their land that was stolen from them that, you know, white Americans are living on. We need to build relations into those communities, between our communities, support those communities. Okay, if you're a white worker, you need to be supporting indigenous people and black folks and trans folks and solidifying the working class through that work. I don't have all the answers for how that happens. It's going to vary very drastically from one place to another. I'm from South Carolina. If you're in California or Montana or Texas, all those places have very different material conditions. I can't give you a formula or a recipe for what to do. I can give you tools like this, which is really just kind of like a better way to see the world, to dismantle all that indoctrination that we've received through capitalist education. I can give you some tools for how to think and how to view things, but you have to come up with a strategy that works where you are, in your workplace, in your neighborhood. You have to be ready to stand up and organize with your fellow workers, deprogram your own false consciousness, and we all have to take care of each other. It's going to be rough. People are already losing their lives from losing the right to choose. People in Gaza are losing their lives right now. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be tragic. But we have all the power. We do have all the power as workers. And once we realize that, if we can realize that, everything will change very quickly. So please, please educate yourself, arm yourself with knowledge, teach each other, be patient with each other, and focus on building a movement, not petty disagreements, not silly little debates about what might or might not work. Get out there and do stuff. Find out what works through action. And if you want a little more hopium injected into your veins, I highly recommend our video on revolutionary optimism. Now is a great time to watch that, or watch it again if you've seen it already. It has inspiring words for Ho Chi Minh and Fred Hampton and other revolutionary figures who faced even worse odds than we're facing here with Donald Trump today. So give that a watch, and that's all I have to say for now. But we will have a lot more videos in the coming weeks. If you like this, then, you know, subscribe. Share this with friends who might be feeling down if you think it might help them. And above all, be safe out there. I'm EJ. This is NonCompete. We'll see you next time.